Victor Oladokun. It's really a wonderful pleasure to be the moderator of this session here in the beautiful city of Dar es Salaam and in this wonderful edifice, the Julius Nyerere International Conference Center. As Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, the president of the African Development Bank, likes to say, what Africa does with agriculture, particularly during the massive changes that we're experiencing with climate change and other global challenges, what Africa does with with agriculture will determine the future of food in the future. This is not rhetoric, it's not hyperbole, it is a fact. So during our time together today, what we're going to do is quickly do a very quick recap of events, developments, and updates post Dakar 2. If you were in Dakar in January, it was a phenomenal event, and you'll be hearing a little bit more about that from some of the participants if you were not there or you've not followed up on some of the things that happened then. Our goal, therefore, is to move the agriculture transformation needle agenda forward as quickly as we can. But I'd like to acknowledge first a very dear colleague of mine, a brilliant agriculturalist, and somebody who has been at the forefront of driving a lot of what the bank is doing in the field of agriculture and agro-processing. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly put your hands together for my dear colleague, the one, the only, Dr. Martin Fergette.
Good morning, everybody. It gives me so much joy to see Minister Bashe. Whenever I see him, I just smile, because he also smiles. Honorable Minister Charles Parker, honorable ministers here, ladies and gentlemen, don't listen to Victor. I'm not that excellent as a scientist. I was a regular scientist. They can tell you, Victor, and Alfred Dixon can tell you I was a regular scientist when I was a scientist. Well, let me welcome you and thank you all for honoring the African Development Bank's and the government of Tanzania's invitation to come out this early to be part of the event, to take stock, and also to look at what progress has been made since we had that watershed moment in Dakar, where governments, 34 heads of state, 75 ministers, including Mr. Bashe, told ourselves that enough is enough. We will feed ourselves. We will raise food production. We will ensure this continent doesn't go hungry when there's a war in Ukraine or there is some pandemic somewhere. Today, we are going to be looking at what commitments have been made and what progress has been made. We're going to have two panels. The first panel will be a panel of ministers. Second panel of development partners. In Dakar, we say we'll mobilize financial, we said we'll mobilize political, and we say we'll mobilize technical resources to achieve food security for Africa. We at the bank are living true to Dakar. We are already investing, and Mr. Bashe will tell you more about that, $120 million for young people, looking at opportunities for young people in Tanzania. We are going to invest $180 million in DRC, also for the agricultural transformation. We are planning to invest another $150 million in Angola to support them. We will be investing also $80 million in Zambia, and the list goes on. But today, the questions we expect to answer at the end of this session is number one, are we on the right path to achieving Dakar 2? What more needs to be done to accelerate the process? Who else do we need to bring on board? What strategies need to be amended? The bank also has recruited 2 special envoys to go around the countries. Our president has recruited 2 special envoys to ensure that the countries are actually on track. I'm happy to have one of them here with us here, Dr. Teranya Sanginga, who is with us here. The other special envoy could not make it, Dr. Williams, Timothy Williams. But they're very important people. They're going to be meeting with you and ensuring we're on track. As we begin this exciting event, let me leave you with 3 words that actually best describes Dakar 2 and this meeting. It's partnership, it's focus, and it's speed. Thank you very much.
you, Dr. Fregene. Very much appreciated. Quick and straight to the point. Well, once again, I'd like to say a very big welcome to everyone. And without further ado, I am going to recognize, and as I recognize our panelists, I'd like to invite you to take your seats on the podium. With us is our host minister, the Honorable Hussein Bashi, the Minister of Agriculture, United Republic of Tanzania. Please give him a warm welcome as he comes to the podium. Kindly take your seat, Honorable Minister. He brings significant experience from the banking, private, and public sector to his current portfolio, and he's been passionate about agriculture, not just the policies of it, the practice of it, but he also is a farmer himself and a huge promoter of young agropreneurs. Also joining us is Dr. Demba Sabali, the Gambian Minister of Agriculture. Please give him a warm welcome. He comes from a medical background and the pharmaceutical industry also, and has recently made very strong forays into public service and politics. It's a wonderful pleasure having you with us today. And last but certainly not the least, the Honorable Minister from Sierra Leone, Henry Musa Baka, Sierra Leone's Minister of Agriculture. He is an economics alumnus of Harvard University as well as the London School of Economics. I wish I could go through the details of everyone's resume here today, and they're actually extremely impressive, but in the interest of time, we will get started. So I'm going to get the ball rolling here before I take my seat. And I'd like to pose a very tricky question to our panelists from Gambia and Sierra Leone. And it's a very serious question. It's one that's on the mind of many Africans today, and probably one of the most important questions that you'll be asked during this panel. Between the both of you, which one has the better jollof rice? Okay, I guess the audience agrees that it's a tie, right? In the absence of Nigeria and Senegal, we'll say it's a tie. All right. Well, I'm going to start with Honorable Bashi, our host minister here. Dakar 2 was just 9 months ago. A lot of time has gone since then. I just want to find out from you, what are some of the activities that you've implemented since then to move the agenda forward? I gather there's quite a lot happening in Tanzania, and if I'm correct, Tanzania is the first African country to actually put in place a presidential delivery council. All right, over to you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you. Karibuni. In Swahili we say you are all welcome to the Dar es Salaam. Let me take first this opportunity to thank the AfDB team, honestly. Immediately after Dakar, they are very close to the dreams of this country, to realize whatever has been agreed in Dakar. Because there is a occasion of the food security, because from our definition, food security is in Tanzania, is the ability to purchase. I can buy it from Gambia, I can buy it from Brazil. But there is a concept of food sovereignty. These are two different things. So the Dakar 2 summit was an eye-opening and a direction towards the real transformation in our continent. And when we came back, the first thing our president did was to implement the resolution by the heads of the state in Dakar. And that was the formation of the Presidential Council delivered. And establishment of what we call Agricultural Transformation Office, which will be working very close in a broader context on the transformation, but also working very close with the Presidential Delivery Council. And not only just forming the council, but giving the council a complete office to do their job and the resources. And now they have already started hitting the road. And among the members, there are two former prime ministers. The former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Haile Mariam, and the former Prime Minister of the United Republic of Tanzania, Mizengo Pinda. They are among the council. And in the framework, we, Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Livestock, we have a role to report on our performance every 3 months on the implementations of the program and development and the budget to the ATO or ADU. Before it was transformed into ATO, it was called Agricultural Delivery Unit, which will be feeding the information to the commission. And the commission will be meeting the president twice a year, so that to report on whatever is happening. And so that I should not influence them, they have been given a new building somewhere very far from my office. So we started with that, but apart from that, among the resolution of the DAKAR was to deal with the issue of wheat, the issue of youth, the issue of edible oil, whereby we are working very close with the African Development Bank and other development partners on transforming the edible oil subsector. We started the bigger pilot last agricultural season with a huge subsidy scheme for the sunflower to support the smallholder farmers with the quality seeds. And it has paid. Our production 2021-2022 of the sunflower seed was just 360,000 metric tons. But by just taking a simple intervention, allowing the private sector to produce good quality seeds, and the government of taking that quality seed from the private sector at the market rate with their brand name, and the government selling that quality seed to the smallholder farmer at a subsidized rate, it has doubled our production of the sunflower seed this agricultural season to close to 800,000 metric tons, whereby our target is to reach 3 million metric tons by 2026, which will give us an average of 1 million liters of the edible oil on the sunflower. We roll out a strong program for the wheat. Just a small trial. AfDB, they are ready to support us. We took the experience of Ethiopia. And then when we came back here, we said, okay, let us close this district and see what will be the outcome. Now the harvest season is going on. I'm crossing my finger to see what will be the outcome.
How does all of this fit into your Build Back Better Tomorrow? How does that all work? If you could just quickly explain to us how that works as a framework.
Okay. When we defined our key value chain in Dakar and say that there is an existing farmers who are smallholder currently, but we decided to come up with a program called Building a Better Tomorrow, BBT. But when we ask ourselves, we want to take youth to farming, but why youth don't farm? We came up with 5 reasons and say the first thing is we cannot just condemning the African youth, telling them that when you graduate, go and get a job. I'm sorry to use this word, but when the investor come here in Tanzania, my friend from Arise is here. When he arrived, he said, give me a land. So why we should not give them youth land? So the government decided to acquire land, not to grab it, to acquire big lands without distorting the environment. pay compensation, we acquire the land, we take youth to the incubation centers to train them the agribusiness and the best agronomy practice, thanks to the commercial banks, because that's a private sector led. They are providing the part of the business and everything. And then when we do that, we put all the necessary infrastructure, including irrigation, storage, and everything. In that big land, we get a big farmer and off-taker who will do farming, but also doing the value addition on that big land. We have started now the program in 3 major regions in this country, and the first batch of youth last week, some of them are here with, in this conference. We are allocating them land, giving them a minimum of 10 acres. When they go for the production, we finance them as an initial capex. After doing that, we form them under what we call cooperative unions, so that they can be bankable. And every youth has a statement of investment, knowing that the cost of land was 1,000 shilling, the cost of irrigation was X, the cost of initial seedling was this, the cost, every cost, so that they understand. But in those areas, we believe the #1 fertilizer of a farm are the farmer, foods of the farmer. The farmer has to be on the farm himself or herself. So the government also built houses in that areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll visit this a little bit more. There's a ton to talk about in Tanzania, but I'm going to come to the Honorable Minister Demba Sabali from Gambia. As we said earlier, rice is a staple for many African countries, particularly the Gambia. And that alone has consumed a tremendous amount of foreign exchange, which obviously in the long term is not sustainable. So what is it that you're doing as a government to create food self-sufficiency, particularly in the rice value chain?
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I thank the African Development Bank for this session. But of course, I must also thank the UN Food System for accompanying us in this journey with IFAD, of course. As you may know, Gambia is definitely a rice-consuming nation. 90% of our population must eat rice daily. And of course, we also a rice-importing country. We are importing about 78% of the rice that we consume. This, like you said, is not sustainable. And as a government, we've started to take steps to make sure rice self-sufficiency is achieved within the shortest possible time, and that is 2030 as enshrined in our national document, as the National Development Plan, and also in our National Agricultural Investment Plan. From 2022 to this year, we've started distributing to the farmers for free high-yield, climate-smart rice seeds. And this we did this year, and that includes maize, groundnuts, and beans. These have started to yield significant results because prior to these seeds, our productivity was on average about a ton or so per hectare. But from the fields already, the expectation is 7 or so tons per hectare. So this is going to almost triple or quadruple our productivity as far as rice production is concerned. That aside, farmers that benefited from these inputs, we also gave them free fertilizer, both urea and NPK. And I think this has increased their productivity. But also, this year in 2023, we've increased our portfolio for fertilizer import. For the first time, we imported about 35,000 metric tons of fertilizer, thanks to the World Bank and OCP. And this is highly subsidized by the government. And this enabled farmers to access fertilizer. And the goal has been, of course, achieved, that farmers are able to get fertilizer no more than 10 kilometers from their residence. So they have good pricing, and accessibility. And also, for the first time, we now started to manufacture and, of course, government buying organic fertilizer. This we are distributing in our mixed farming centers. These mixed farming centers are government-owned. They act as clinics for farmers, and they are spread throughout the country, where farmers meet agri-extension officers on specific days, and there is the team comes from the regional office with experts in either in crop, in livestock, and then they act like a clinic to the farmers. And this has started to yield results. But also this year, in line with trying to increase productivity, the government has done plowing services for up to 80% discounted, paid for by the government, and the 20% is paid for by the farmers. And this has increased the amount of farmers, not only the amount of land that is being cultivated, but of course, like the Honorable Minister for Tanzania has said, there are many reasons why youth were not coming to agriculture, and one of them is the drudgery. And with the introduction of subsidized plowing service, we have seen a whole lot of youth coming into agriculture. Of course, it's supported by our matching grants. And this matching grant for youth especially has motivated a lot of youth to come into agriculture in the Gambia. So all these are steps that has helped us to increase not only the amount of land under cultivation, also not only the amount of tonnage per hectare, but also the amount of youth that has come into agriculture. Of recent, just a few weeks ago, we just concluded a two-day forum in the country, and that was purely dedicated to rice, a two-day national rice forum, to draw a locally made roadmap that is very actual and very tangible. That is to design something local where the country, Gambia, should be able to be rice self-sufficient by 2030. And the forum was very successful, and I think the reports are not out, but we think the experts will be coming out with a roadmap that will get us there.
And just out of curiosity, Honorable Minister, one of the big takeaways from Dakar was the setting up of presidential delivery councils. Who's driving the agricultural transformation in your country at the moment? And what are the specifics that you're planning to deliver on in terms of the country compact?
Yeah, actually, part of the Dakar Compact was to set up a presidential council. Right now, the Office of the Vice President, together with the Ministry of Agriculture, are driving the transformation for the agricultural transformation agenda. And I think this, like we said in our compact, Gambia is a small country, just 2.2 million people, and all we probably need is to develop 20,000 hectares of rice fields and be productive twice a year. This we have started. Already over 2,000 hectares are under production, intense production, and we are part of the K Rice Belt. If you are familiar with this, there were 8 African ministers in South Korea just like a month or so ago, and this we think we will be launching about 1,000 hectares 1st of January. We expect that to be launched, and that should be able to get us to almost 60% of the rice need of the country. So currently the Office of the Vice President, of course the Office of the President is in touch, but the Office of the Vice President and the Ministry of Agriculture are driving the transformation agenda for our agricultural sector.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Minister. I'm going to come to Honorable Henry Musa Baka, Minister of Agriculture in Sierra Leone. Like Gambia, you've tried, you're putting a focus on rice and cassava and I believe livestock. And you've also tried to implement, with very limited success, quite a number of initiatives, including e-vouchers. There have also been several policy shifts. I'm just curious, post-Dakar, why are you confident that you have a plan that's going to deliver and be very different from what has transpired in the past? And then bring us up to speed on some of the major developments that have taken place since Dakar 2 in January.
Great, thank you, Victor. Let me also take the opportunity to thank the organizers, the African Development Bank, the UN Food Systems, and our host, Minister, for having us here today. So yeah, we in Sierra Leone, we have done, since the pandemic, a number of initiatives with the goal of being both rice self-sufficient, reducing malnutrition and hunger in rural areas. So you pointed to the e-voucher. It was a very targeted intervention that the government did in a number of areas. There was actually 3 interventions. One was to put up a credit facility. This is a $10 million credit facility for private sector that operated in the rice value chain to be able to bring inputs in, mostly seeds and fertilizer. Then we established a machine range system, which is basically the government's effort of spreading mechanization in the rice value chain. And then there was also an e-extension program that we set out so that we can reach farmers very quickly. Now those interventions actually yielded quite some good results, and we've learned quite a lot from it. With those interventions, I think we've done it now for the past 2.5 years. The first year we were able to put 12,000 hectares under mechanized rice cultivation. Second year, 20,000, and we stopped to the same in the third year. And we did see quite a jump in rice production, actually, 9% in 2019, immediately post-pandemic. 2020, 18%, and then 20% 2022. So there's quite a lot of results that we got from it and a lot of lessons. And that actually has formed the basis for the president to say, we can go out there and say, we can take agriculture and really meet the goal of feeding ourselves and exporting and creating jobs and being an engine for economic growth in the country. So for example, in the credit facility that we set up, this was taken up by the private sector, everybody paid. It was one of those examples where when we did it at the time, we didn't know actually that it would have the effect of de-risking in ways that we didn't even foresee. At the time, it was the private sector people in the input subsector would apply for credit to their suppliers. The government, through the commercial bank, will pay directly. The invoice will come, they will pay directly. They took the loan in dollars, and they paid back in leones. And at the time they paid, which was 18 months down the line, like Sierra Leone, all these other countries have experienced currency devaluation. So you can imagine if you are a private sector person that are taking this loan, that such a big risk is taken away. So we want to do that again and do it in a much bigger way, and not just for rice, but for other value chains. So fast forward, President has just started his second term, building on what we've done the past 3 years, really. He wants to make agriculture, he has made agriculture the flagship program. Now that's not trivial, because he intends to put a lot more resources there, both financially and the government budget. And then I think more crucially, really, is his time and advocacy efforts towards the agenda to drive the sector. And this is very telling most times when we're in cabinet meetings. Somebody will be talking about energy or roads, and he will say, but where is the agriculture in this? That goes quite a long way to hammer home for ministers that there's a common goal that we all have, which is to deliver on his flagship. And so post DAKAR, the program that the president was developing for the president as his flagship, the compact is a big part of it. And you mentioned some of the value chains we are looking at, like colleagues here on the panel. Rice is a big part of it for us. And there the play really is mechanization and irrigation, working with partners, African Development Bank, the ISDB. There's some funding to begin to pilot small-scale irrigation in some key areas that we really want to focus on. There'll also be a big focus on seed systems. There, what we would like to do is, I think for the longest time we've had in the space open pollinated varieties for rice. I think we want to make this leap and say, can we have hybrid systems? Can we set a timeline for, say, next 3 years? There's a pipeline of hybrid seeds that can meet both commercial and smallholder farmers. And we do that by building up the institutions, by making sure there's private sector there that will be able to do this and take that forward. We're also very keen to move to reduce importation of poultry products, mostly eggs and chicken. I was told when I met the poultry farmers that 90% of the operational cost comes from feed, and they import this. And feed is really maize, soybeans, and sorghum, and all these other things. And so there's a big play. We're confident that if we push in that direction, we can also make quite a lot of impacts there. Similarly for onions as well. In the last 36 months, I think Sierra Leone imported close to maybe $34 million of worth of onions. And just before I came here, I visited a private sector that's doing mechanized onion cultivation. He piloted with 10 hectares, got about 15 tons per hectare, but he hadn't done anything with his wells. The second season, he tried some liming, and he doubled that. And he plans to now do 45 tons per hectare, do that 2 times a year.
Okay.
With interventions like that, we think we can also make big inroads in there. So then finally, let me also land on cocoa, which is the other big value chain for us. Obviously, so as you can see, the strategy here is we want to reduce some of what we're importing, but we also want to sell what we produce, because that then works. It's sort of like a double whammy, where we're getting some forex and reducing some of our spending of it, which helps the economy as a whole. Let me quickly bring it to institutionally how the president is thinking about driving this agenda, which we're calling Feed Sierra Leone. He recognizes the nexus between energy, climate change, and agriculture. He just established a presidential initiative on that. And he's asked me to put forward to him a list of people to form the presidential council that will be a part of this this framework for the presidential initiative that will drive the transformation agenda going forward for the Feed Salon program that we're doing, and for some of the work that we want to do in the compact.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I'm going to play the angel's advocate here. I'm the grandson of a cocoa farmer, and when I was growing up, the last thing I wanted to do was become a farmer. I know a lot better now, and the industry has changed over the years. So the question I want to ask is actually a two-in-one question. Without the youth, there's no agriculture and there's no food. So 2 things. Number one, and I think Honorable the Honorable Minister from Tanzania mentioned that there are 5 reasons why the youth don't want to get into agriculture, and that's wonderful to know. But how is it that you're communicating as a government and as a ministry to the younger generation to let them know that there is a living to be made, money to be made in agriculture? Communication is going to be key. What is it that you're doing? And secondly, as we know, accessing finance is extremely difficult for the younger generation. So I just want you to take about 2 minutes each, not more than that, because I'm going to follow up with a closing question to you so that we can go on to our next panel, for which we have very limited time. So I'm going to start with the Honorable Minister from Tanzania first, and we'll work our way down this way. 2 minutes each, maximum.
Thank you for this. Communication is vital. For a very long time, when we have been branding the agricultural sector, what comes in my mind, or anyone's mind, is an old folk with 60 years, 70 years, with a hoe in the hand, very dirty. That was coming. So what we did in Tanzania now is that we have youth who are engaging in agriculture themselves. We supported them and then made them as a role model for that. They are the one talking to their fellow youth, showing them that there is a future here. I myself have 1, 2, 3, 4. Even in our incubation centers, we took away all the professors in the incubation centers for the 90 days they have been in the incubation centers, and allow youth who are engaging in agriculture, youth who are doing trading on the agricultural products, doing that business, talking to their fellow youth. So that's what was one of our strategy. But when we did an analysis, when you ask them, one of the bottleneck was the technology. So we are showing them the technology involvement in the agro sector. But there is not a single youth will wait a cashew tree for 3 years at the farm field. And then when we decided, when the president said that there is no closure of the border, agriculture is a business, whoever produces everything, he or she is allowed to sell out.
Like I said, Honorable Minister, 2 minutes, your time's out.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to go on to the Honorable Minister from Sierra Leone. Sorry about that, Honorable Minister. I mean, from Gambia.
Oh, thank you very much. In the Gambia, we have a slogan that agriculture is enterprise. And this is the message we have for the youth, that you can be on the farm and be a wealthy person. And this message is resonating well because this year we started what we call youth farms. And we have about 7 agricultural regions. We have them in about 4 for this year as pilot. And also in our private sector engagement, just last week, with help from one of our projects, we distributed about $4 million equivalent to 19 small and medium enterprise. All are youth-led. And also, we have youth-led vegetable gardens, specifically only for youth. So there are youth that are the face of agriculture in the Gambia. And we thought that should be the best way to communicate to the young people. And that aside, also with the matching grant, much of our agricultural projects, there is a major component of matching grant, and this has been the most attractive. But again, the biggest obstacle to youth in agriculture and also communication, like mentioned earlier, is the access to land. And that is why we had this forum. And in this forum, we had traditional rulers, because land tenure system in the Gambia is traditional, and traditional rulers and chiefs being present at the forum, also majority of the participants were youth. So this message has gone across, and the need for youth and women to access land. So our communication as far as agriculture is enterprising, and you can be wealthy on the farm, and I think it's selling.
Agriculture is enterprising and agriculture is cool. Yeah. Okay, Honorable Minister DAKAR.
Yes, so in Sierra Leone too, there's quite a big focus on youth. The program that you mentioned earlier, there was a youth component, which is Chiefdom Youth Farms. It's the sort of perhaps the lowest politically administrative unit. So we had 192 youth farms that had relative success in that last iteration. We want to do this much, much better. We learned a lot of lessons that we will build on and design this in a much better way so that the enterprising element of it comes out. The first iteration was sort of pandemic-driven, where there was a need to quickly produce food, and so we engaged a lot of the youths to work on farms to feed. But the next iteration will be one where it's enterprising. In terms of communication, we will be, when we launch the Feed Salon program, youth involvement in agriculture will be key. The President's choice for Minister of Agriculture was not a mistake. He wanted a youthful Minister of Agriculture that gets out there and engages. That sends a message to the youth that they too can be farmers, they too, in a lot of ways, can engage in the value chain. And that's what we're trying to do as we land.
Awesome.
Yes.
I'm going to give your Excellencies 1 minute to provide closing comments. Unfortunately, time has run away from us. We did start very late. But again, we greatly appreciate your coming out so early. There's so much to cover, and we can't cover, obviously, everything that's really critical in the limited amount of time we have. So I'm going to start with Honorable Bashi first. 1 minute to provide closing comments on the way forward concerning other issues that we have not touched upon right now.
Thank you. Just a few words. One, agriculture is a long-term investment. Agriculture is science, agriculture is technology. The sustainability of a global economy will depend much on the untapped resources. So my plea and my call for the international community, Africa is the youngest continent. Africa has all the potential to stabilize the global economies. Other economies are at the maturity level. The African economies are still at the growth level. Let's invest in Africa, confront the global financial infrastructure, put more resources in African continent to feed the other part of the world and create a global equity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Hussein Beshi. And we'll now go over to His Excellency, Honorable Demba Sabali, for your closing comments.
Thank you very much. I think the take-home message in this is our development partners are doing greatly well, but we need to fast-track the Dakar Compact. I think countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, have identified their issues, and their compacts are very comprehensive. So moving into implementation at this moment, it will be very vital, because agriculture is not only a food issue for our region. For us, it is beyond economic, social, it's a national security issue. So I think moving forward, let's look at the compact and accelerate as much as we can do and go into implementation the soonest. I think countries like Gambia and its likes don't have much time for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bakar.
Thank you.
Final words from you.
Yes. So the reality is, for countries like Sierra Leone, Gambia, and a lot of us, governments, development partners can put a lot of resources into agriculture. It's probably not going to be enough. We need to look to the private sector. That's where, if we have the private sector on board, in that partnership, that's where we would make real change. So part of what the compacts can do, part of what our partnerships, governments, development partners, is to think very hard about how do we attract the private sector in this space. We've got, there's a perception of risk in agriculture and on the continent as a whole, but the reward, when you compare interest rates for investments in places in Africa versus what you get when you put your money elsewhere, it doesn't fit economic rules where investment should be going where the highest rewards are. So there's something we're not doing to be able to attract private sector there. That's what we need to crack. If we crack that code, I think we can make the impacts that we want, because the scale will be larger, efficiencies will be there, smallholder farmers will learn, and I think that's how we would drive change in our various economies for the sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you give a warm round of applause to our distinguished panelists? Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the fact of the matter is that there are 246 million people in Africa who go to bed hungry every night. That is unacceptable. These are not statistics. These are real people. In Dakar 2, we heard the numbers. The initial commitment was 30 billion US dollars. At the last count, it was 70 billion. I'm glad that we have a number of our partners and private sector leaders here today, because the critical missing link in all of this many times is finance. So we're going to be talking about that in a few moments. But I believe that we have the vision, we have the political will, we have the technologies, and we have the resources to truly transform agriculture in our generation. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, please give our fine panelists a warm round of applause. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We're going to have to switch gears very, very quickly and go on to our next panel. If you could kindly bear with me just for a few moments so I can call up my notes, that would be much appreciated. Again, time is of the essence. So, without further ado, I think we're done with all of our introductions and protocols, so we'll get into the meat of things. I'm going to call on Dr. Martin. Well, I don't think Dr. Martin is here. Is he here? Oh, Dr. Martin, kindly forgive me. Dr. Martin van Nieuwkoop, the World Bank's Director of Agriculture and Food Global Practice. If you could kindly come to the platform, that would be appreciated. And Dr. Donald Brown, who is the Associate Vice President, Program Management Department at IFAD. Not Donald, Donald. I know it's early in the morning, but could you kindly give our panelists a warm round of applause? And Dr. Simeon Ehu, the Regional Director, Continental Africa, CGIAR, and Director General of the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, IITA. We're gonna race very quickly. And last but certainly not the least, Dr. Nivet Shetty, Arise IIP. Please again give them a warm round of applause. So, gentlemen, I think one of the things that we need to talk about very, very quickly is the issue of finance. And we just talked about that a few moments ago, but I'm going to start with Mr. Shetty first. You guys in Arise are doing amazing things. You're where the rubber is hitting the road, and you're the nexus between partners, the private sector, and practitioners. What's your experience and what's going on with regards to finance? Is it readily available, or do we still have to jump through a lot of hoops?
Well, it's a mix of both. And what we have seen with Arise, in the multiple countries that we are setting up is trying to shift from, let's say, subsidized agriculture to incentivized agriculture. So we're essentially focused on building an entire ecosystem where cost of production is down, the cost of agriculture, the cost of logistics, and essentially as the business case gets more attractive, we've seen that there's a lot of interest in financing agricultural ecosystems and allied industries in the countries that we operate in. So a lot of work to be done, but I think the formula of having an efficient system in place across the entire value chain has actually enabled the finance to actually come in much easier in most of the African countries that we operate in.
Okay, I'm going to go over to Simeon. Simeon, your thoughts?
So, I hope you hear me very well. Look, I'm the odd person here because I'm with a development organization providing funding, and I lead an international organization for research.
And if you could kindly speak into your microphone, thank you.
And also regional director for Continental Africa for CGIAR. But the nice thing is that I'm bridging the two, because coming from the World Bank and joining the CGIAR, I think we really have an opportunity to try to see how we can partner together with the multilateral organizations and the CGIAR. One good news that I want to say is that last year, the CGIAR, together with African Development Bank and FARA and other sub-regional organizations, got to an agreement to try to see how we can work together to have a big impact in Africa. And this was reaffirmed in Durban in early June with a plan of action. I think that the role of science is more than ever important and significant today to be able to make a difference on the ground. And that's what is lacking. How can we use science to really improve the lives of people? and how can we deliver, the technology that people are looking for. And I want to really commend, okay, Victor, the involvement of the African Development Bank supporting a program like the TAT, the Technology for African Agricultural Transformation, which is a good example of how we can take technologies, off the shelf to the people, okay? And that's where the partnership between the CGIAR and the Development Bank come in to be able to have an impact. So I'm also looking at my colleagues here from the World Bank and from IFAD. Let's try to see how we can even scale this one up further to make a difference on the ground. Okay. So let me stop here. I know we are lack of time, but we have an opportunity to talk more.
So let me thank you very much, Simeon. I'm going to phrase the question differently for Dr. Mashin here. The World Bank and the African Development Bank especially have had a very long-standing relationship in terms of collaboration. Post Dakar 2, where do you see that collaboration going? And I say this with, again, I'm reflective on one of the things that Secretary Yellen has made it a huge mantra recently, and that's the need to leverage our relationships and leverage our resources a whole lot more than we have in the past. Where do you see that collaboration going between the World Bank and the African Development Bank, seeing that you have the same agenda and the same focus in this regard?
Well, very good. I mean, that's a very good question. I mean, we're talking here about food systems this week. Of course, food systems is a very comprehensive concept, and it means actually to get impacts at scale, we need comprehensive programs. And currently, that's of course not the case. I mean, governments have their own programs, donors have their own projects, the private sector is investing. So actually, how can we get to more comprehensive programs? In that respect, in our portfolio, the World Bank is moving towards results-based financing using program for results. It actually combines policy reforms with investment lending. It combines government spending with support from IFIs. It has policy reforms that actually enable, the investment of the private sector. So a shift from project financing to sector-wide financing and using results-based financing, what we call the World Bank P4Rs, is the way to go. This week we will actually be launching a $1.7 billion Tanzania Food Systems Resilience Program, $1.4 billion government of Tanzania, $300 million of the World Bank. Disbursements go against disbursement-linked indicators that are verified by third-party monitoring parties. So also a very good platform, for all the donors to come in and actually join, and move away from project financing to program financing. When I started as Global Director for Agriculture and Food at the World Bank 4 years ago, we had less than 10% of our lending in those programs for results. Right now we have 30 to 40%. We need to grow that further, and we like to do that in collaboration with the African Development Bank. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to go next to Donald. Again, just like the World Bank and ITA and other partners that the African Development Bank has worked with, we've worked very, very closely with IFAD, particularly, and I'm so glad that IFAD is passionate about smallholder farmers, and you're doing an amazing job in that space on the continent. Thank you for all that you do in that regard, because it's not just about commercial farming, it's also about lifting up the smallholder farmers. But I want to find out if there have been any developments since Dakar 2 about Mission 1 for 200. For those who are not familiar with Mission 1 for 200, if you could tell us what that's about and what kind of developments have taken place since Dakar.
Thank you. Happy to be here. So for me, it's not just about the amount of financing. There will never be enough. It's about how they complement each other. And in many ways, it must be about bringing in the private sector. International investments really will not solve the problem. It will be the private sector investments. So IFAD over the next 3 years, or next 5 years, will be investing $3 billion in smallholder agriculture in Africa. But it's done with governments, but it's done in a way to try and make it a better environment for private sector investment. So there's 3 things you've got to do, and that's what our money tries to help do. One is lower the cost of business in rural areas. The transaction costs are often very, very high. Access to finance, cost of engaging markets, etc. You need to also reduce information asymmetries and make sure that there is real understanding of prices and how they're managed. And the third area is you need to ensure that value generation is not only supported, but is actually better recognized and rewarded, and that includes the small farmers so that they really benefit from it. And that's where we come in very much. So a good example is the special agriculture processing zones, for example, the one in Nigeria, which brings together funding from IFAD to bring in the small farmers, African Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, but also large private sector global actors like OLAM. And that's what we're trying to do in that context. So in terms of the Mission 1 in 200, it's an initiative which we are working with the African Development Bank to try and mobilize $1 billion to feed 200 million people in Africa over the next few years. And this initiative we're currently working on capitalize on 45 years of collaboration with the African Development Bank and takes it to scale.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We didn't have an opportunity to take any questions from the audience during our last session. I'm going to give the audience an opportunity to do that, and then I'm going to come back with 2 follow-up questions, which hopefully we can run through as quickly as possible, since some of you have to be in another session starting in a few minutes. Do I see a show of hands going 1, 2, 3? Okay, I see one hand over here. If you could pass a microphone to the gentleman right in front of me. I see another hand to the left, and one more, and we're done. But please make sure that these are questions, not statements, and not epistles. Questions. Short, crisp, straight to the point. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. My name is Fadel Njame. I'm the CEO of Food System Transformation Solution. Just to build on 2 statements from my brother Awi and Donald, the issue is not the amount of funding, but the quality. So my question to you is, what are you going to do to build a system for collaborating to drive technical, institutional, and financial innovation requires to transform food system? You mentioned it's not our project financing. What mechanism do we have to make sure that that ecosystem is built together, driven by science, technology, and policy?
And which of our panelists
well,
do you
Awi, I'm
direct
looking
your
at
question
Awi.
to? Sorry?
Simon to start.
Okay. All right, that's question number 1. We'll take the second question, and then the last one over there.
Thank you. My name is Kwesi Atakra. DAKAR 2 provides a very clear mechanism and excitement for engagement. I would like to know, how does your organizations see this as a clear pathway for agricultural transformation? What are you going to do in relation to these country compacts that have been established? And in a lot of cases, even funded, with funding. But what is your organization going to do to basically contribute towards the realization of what the compacts have put down? Thank you.
Okay, your question is 2?
This question can go to CGIAR and the World Bank.
Okay, we'll make it the World Bank because Simeon already has a question. All right, the last question to the right.
Good morning. I'm Jacob Mignona from IITA. My question is, we are here as an African to look at our needs in terms of food. And for that food, we need some resources. I'm happy to have this panel talking about funds. So what is the total value of money to be invested in Africa to take agriculture to the next level? What is the amount? This goes to the World Bank.
If I could just jump in there, I think that's really a very vague question. There's absolutely no way we can talk about the totality of funds that can go into agriculture. It's a huge, huge enterprise, and you have different country compacts. I don't think those numbers have been worked out, but I'll let the World Bank address those. So gentlemen, over to you, and I'll come back to you with a quick question. So the questions that have been directed to you, we'll start with Simeon first, and then we'll go to IFAD and then the World Bank.
No, thank you.
Just very brief.
Thank you very much, Victor, and thank you, Fadel, for a very interesting question. Look, the CGIAR has been rising to the challenge, okay? And that's why over the past 3 years, it's been trying to reform. And now we have something called the One CGIAR that put together all the CGIAR centers, and with one unified board governance, with one executive managing director, and with regional directors serving West and Central Africa, East and Southern, and a continental director, which I am responsible for. And we are responsible for also working with the continental organization like the African Development Union and CADEP and FARA. And just as early as last June, the CGIAR together with FARA, following the Abidjan Declaration, agreed on an action plan, okay, on 7 steps. And if we implement this action plan, we can go a long way to make it on the ground. Of course, it needs to be financed. There are some indicative figures there, okay? But I think that by combining the action plan together with, the compact of the different countries and look at multiple sources of financing within the development community, we can make a difference. And I think the CGIAR is extremely well positioned to be able to be a broker, providing taking assistance needed to make a difference on the ground. That's what I would like to offer as an answer to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Simeon. We'll keep it brief and short, and we'll go on to IFAD and then to the World Bank.
Thank you very much. There is absolutely no magic recipe here for this, and it's not about money. Lots of money has been spent that's been badly spent. So it's about smart investments. As I said, there's some underpinning things that need to happen, as I say, reducing the cost of doing business, increasing the information understanding, and also the value generation. But there is a major capacity gap which needs to be filled as well at all levels, and we need to be working on that. So, as I say, no magic wand. If we learn from the experience I was talking about in Nigeria, some of the key ingredients would be the need for clarity of vision, government leadership, continuity and predictability of policy environment, long-term, and I emphasize that long-term engagement of development partners, governments, financial institutions, but also the full engagement of farmers. Very often the farmers are not in these conversations, and obviously, and really importantly, the private sector. So one of the things, just to end with, that we're trying to do today to help Tanzania this evening is to launch the Agricultural Transformation Office in Tanzania to provide some additional support to government to actually deliver their vision and make sure these voices come together. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, so in the run-up to the UN Food Systems Summit 2 years ago, we've done some calculations about the cost of food systems transformation in support of healthy people, planet, and economy. And the estimate was that it requires about, $350 billion in additional investment per year for the next 10 years. So clearly that's an amount that no single institution can provide, so you need collaboration and you need entry point. And I think the country compacts, was the question, actually are a very good platform to engage on that at the country level. We see as our role in the World Bank, to enable and facilitate the financing of those country compacts by bringing together, the domestic resources and making sure that those are aligned with the objectives of the country compact, seeing how we can crowd in private sector investment at quality, because there's a lot to be done on the ESG standards in the food sector as well. So what is the opportunity of compacts between the public and the private sector, where the public sector provides de-risking, and in return the private sector raises ESG standards. And thirdly is to really address the huge fragmentation that is going on in the donor financing at the country level, and how those country compacts can actually provide a platform for better consistency and collaboration in that respect. So that's what we see as our role.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'm going to very quickly ask my last question here. If you could just, I'm going to give you 1 minute to deal with that. And it's a very short question. You guys are you're on the cutting edge of what's happening with regard to agriculture on the continent. Donald, you talked a few moments ago about a missing link or gaps. If there's, from your own experience, if there's one missing link or one gap that you feel has to be fixed, that could be a tipping point for the better, what would that be? I'm going to start with you, Martin, come to Donald, Simeon, and then to Nibet.
Yeah.
1 minute each.
I mean, for me, it's actually mobilizing climate financing for agriculture and food. I mean, right now, the agriculture food sector receives about 4 or 5% of global climate financing, which is about $660 billion per year, public and private combined. If the agriculture and food sector would get 1/3, because the contribution of the sector is about 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions, you can calculate that would be about $220 billion if you could mobilize. Currently, you are at 4.4 to 5% of 6.6 billion, so that's about 28 to 29 billion. So if you can actually move from 28 to 20, that will make an enormous difference, and I see this as a huge opportunity.
Thank you very much. Donald?
Thanks very much. So for me, I think it's the cost of doing business in rural areas. You know, until that comes down, people will be investing in supermarkets in Dar es Salaam or telecommunications somewhere else.
Very dire. Okay. Simeon?
Yes. So, look, I just want to make one statement. Science offers enormous potential to improve food security in Africa. And how can how can it translate the result of science from research to the final users? It requires collaboration between the science and the founders and the users. So my call here will be to ensure that that collaboration really takes place. That's the way we can make a difference.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Nivet, last words.
So, basically, Arise's business model is, taking care of the gaps that exist in the agro-processing and industrial sector. For us, we really summarize it as understanding that everything is interlinked. So you cannot invest heavily in agriculture without having a processor in place. And at the same time, you cannot have heavy investments in processing without having an efficient agricultural system in place. So what we have done in a lot of countries is we directly work with farmers, we directly work with processors, and then also with banks, with development organizations to make sure that everybody is working for the same goal and are aligned on what needs to be fixed, what gaps need to be taken care of to actually make progress. Looking at gaps in silos, as to looking at specifically the gap in financing or gap in agricultural development or in bringing in production, delays the value that you can actually create in the system.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say a very big thank you to our distinguished panelists, Dr. Martin Van Nieuwkoop, Dr. Donald Brown, Dr. Simeon Ehui. Please remain seated just for a few moments, and Dr. Nivet Shetty. I'm just going to call very, very quickly on the Assistant Director of Agriculture, Finance and Rural Infrastructure, Richard Ofori Mante, to again cut your closing comments short. You've got 1.5 minutes and we're out of here. Thank you so much. 1.5 minutes.
Well, agriculture is a long-term investment. Fast-track DAKAR 2 components, compacts, leverage the private sector. These were the closing remarks of the honorable ministers. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists, guests, and participants, as we bring this insightful and thought-provoking event to a close, I would like to express my gratitude on behalf of the bank, the African Development Bank, to each and every one of you for being a part of DAKAR 2 food sovereignty and resilience. Over the past 1.5 hours or so, or close to an hour or so,
you have 30 seconds.
We have delved
you have 30 seconds.
into critical discussions.
You have 45 seconds more.
That have the power to shape the future of production, productivity, food, nutrition security, and sustainability on our continent. At the heart of this collective effort, I would say that the research community's role is very vital and invaluable. The research community's capacity to support African governments, development partners, and private sector actors is central in delivering at scale. The diversity of perspectives and expertise present here today highlights our commitment to tackling complex challenges through collaboration and innovation. As we reflect on the discussions that have unfolded,
you have
it is
30
evident that our journey toward food sovereignty is not just a responsibility, but a shared opportunity. Thank you so much for your unwavering dedication and participation. Let's move ahead hand in hand. Thank you.